Hey everybody, this is Tim with Op-Ed Daily. If you guys didn't notice, the camps at Standing Rock and the Oseti camps and all of those camps have been cleared out. They've taken bulldozers in there and demolished the buildings and arrested anybody that that stayed. But that's not really the biggest news story right now regarding the protests. Although it's very sad to know that those protests are now over by the forceful hand of the governments that have been oppressing Native Americans for hundreds and hundreds of years now. That's the sad part, is that's not the biggest problem here. One of the biggest issues that I see now is the fact that they quite silently and very strategically passed into law today these three bills that make it very, very difficult for people to protest in North Dakota. And if you do protest in North Dakota, you better have a good lawyer, because they're going to need to get your ass out of a big sling. Either that or you're going to be paying some buku money. So let's look at House Bill 1426. This passed, and it increases penalties for riot offenses. And I'll get into that in a moment. Crimes such as inciting a riot involving 100 or more people or providing weapons for a riot will increase from a Class C felony to a Class B felony, which is punishable by up to 20 years in prison and or a $20,000 fine. Okay. Engaging in a riot or failing to disperse, and this is part of it, when ordered by police, would also increase from a Class B misdemeanor to a Class A misdemeanor, which is punishable by up to 1 year in jail and or a $3,000 fine. There have been about 700 to 800, maybe even 1,000 arrests so far during the Dakota Access protests since August. And there are many people that were arrested more than once, in fact. I'd also like to point out, what the hell is a riot? What is a riot? Okay, because these people have been charged. Many of these people have been charged with engaging in a riot. As a matter of fact, the charge of engaging in a riot has been used more than 360 times. And, what's to say that they don't call you the provocateur and charge you with inciting a riot, which could land you in up to 20 years in prison and a $20,000 fine? What's to say they don't do that? So my question to you is, what in the hell is the difference now between a protest and a riot? Can you give me a very specific, legal, definitive definition with precedents and case law to back it up about what a riot is versus a protest? Because since Ferguson, we have seen the lines between protest and riot blur. They've blurred so badly that you really cannot tell the difference. Because look at the protests that has gone on over the last several months, 9 months, what have you. Look at those protests, and you tell me that those are riots, and I will look at you and call you a liar straight to your face. Because at not one point in time during these protests was this ever a riot, not even close to being a riot. Were there people that did things towards cops that maybe they shouldn't have? Sure. But did any police officers get hurt? Not that I am aware of. Not one. Did protesters get hurt by police? Oh, absolutely. There were numerous people that had to go to the hospital. Remember the water cannons? They were shooting at them in, negative 40-degree temperatures? Do you remember that? I do. You remember the holes they would put in people's body because they're shooting them with these, quote, less than lethal weapons, 5 feet away from them? Just shooting them randomly at people, or anybody with a camera. They'd shoot people's cameras, blew that one guy's finger off almost. So where is the riot here with the Dakota pipeline protests? There was no riot. Yet they're charging them with a riot. And now, if you are taking part in a riot, you can go to jail for up to a year and a $3,000 fine for being part of a protest. Because this is one of the best examples of a peaceful protest that we've seen in the last probably 10 years in terms of its size and its longevity. They were very, very peaceful, these people, because this was something that was important to them. It was something that was very, very important to them and also important to other people. I would like to point out to everybody that this very same pipeline and the very same kind of piping was originally planned to go either through Bismarck or just to the north of it. But the Army Corps of Engineers came out and said, no, we're not going to do this because it's too dangerous to the water supply of Bismarck. Okay, Army Corps of Engineers, if it's too dangerous to the water supply of Bismarck, then why in the hell is it not too dangerous for the water supply of all those natives? When you pump this pipe, a half a mile on the other side of the reservation border, and arguably on the border, I know they had to move it up a little bit and reroute it even later on because they were going through reservation territory. But they claimed, oh, well, it's the easement. This belongs to the government. So it's okay for them to put this pipeline just a hair north of the reservation territory, right across this river, the Missouri River. It's okay to do that, but it's not okay to go through Bismarck. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because 92.5% of everybody that lives in Bismarck is white. And I'm not blaming the people of Bismarck because, matter of fact, they didn't even get a chance to say no to it. They didn't get a chance to vote on it. There was no referendum. There was no, hey guys, do you want this oil pipeline running through your water supply? Hell, everybody would have said no, go around it. But they didn't have to do that. They didn't even get that far. What did they do? The Army Corps of Engineers said, no, it's too dangerous. No, don't want to mess up the water supply for 92.5% of white people in this city. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to reroute this damn thing, and we're going to take it right down to them fucking Native Americans' place, and we're going to pipe it right across there. So that doesn't even make any sense. The protests come out and they're peaceful until the very end. These protests were peaceful, even though these natives were getting the shit beat out of them, getting shot by rubber bullets, getting shot by tear gas canisters, getting shot by everything that the police could think of to shoot them, and for no other reason than the police, I guess, at one point during the day said, you know what, guys, we're bored. Let's go up and create this line and provoke these protesters into standing their ground in front of us, even though every time that the police decided to move forward, the protesters would move back. They didn't take the bait. And that frustrated the police. Because they wanted them to take the bait, but they didn't. They called it a riot anyway. And now they've passed a law that says you're going to go to jail for a long fucking time and you're going to owe a big ass fine if you do this. If you are part of this protest / riot / whatever we want to call it, your ass is going to jail. So let's move on to these other ones, shall we? These other bills that were passed. We've got House Bill 1304, which makes it a Class A misdemeanor to wear a mask to conceal your identity while committing a crime or fleeing from a crime. And that was passed, this was back in, mid-February. That was passed with a 33-12 vote. And the governor signed this one into law today. Think about that. You can't wear a mask to, quote, conceal your identity, end quote, while committing a crime or fleeing from a crime. So let me get this straight. And since we know a Class A misdemeanor leads you into a year in jail and $3,000 fines, that would be the charge for that, Class A misdemeanor. So basically what they've done here is they're claiming that the Dakota Access Pipeline protest was actually a riot, which it was not a riot. Not even close to being a riot. But they're going to call it a riot, which is a criminal offense, okay? So they take something that is a right, turn it into something that is illegal, and then say, hey, if you're wearing a mask to conceal your identity, we're gonna throw you in jail for a lot longer and charge you money a lot more than we would have before. Okay? Now let's look at this. To conceal your identity. It's fucking cold in North Dakota. Is it not? Hell yeah, it's cold. It gets negative 50 degrees out there and sometimes. That's cold. So if you happen to be protesting during the wintertime and you're wearing a face mask of any kind that, quote, conceals your identity, whether you're trying to do that or not, whether that was your intent, doesn't matter. They can claim whatever the hell they want to claim, and that's it, and they'll charge you with it, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Okay? So that's a problem. And then, this Republican, Jan Myrdal, she says, we all have a right to free speech, but we don't have a right to evade prosecution of a crime. Really? To evade prosecution of a crime that you're in while you're in a protest, you're not actually committing a crime until the police just turn around and just arbitrarily say, "Oh, guess what, guys? This is now a riot." I mean, think about that. If you're imagine you out there in a protest, something you care deeply about, but you're all Gandhi out there, okay? You're Martin Luther King Jr. out there. You don't want anybody to provoke the police. You don't want to throw anything. You don't want to hit. You don't want to do anything that would cause violence against these other people. So you go out there personally and you join this protest because you believe in what it is. You believe in whatever it is, whatever the protest is. And then all of a sudden the police start to charge you. Charge you meaning running at you or stalking towards you, marching towards you with their riot shields or their riot sticks. Let's imagine you're out there just protesting because you believe in something, and all of a sudden the police start marching towards you. What do? Do you turn around and back up because that's apparently what the police are wanting you to do at that very moment, even though they never said back up? They just start marching toward you? Do you back up? Well, guess what? If you back up while in that protest, while wearing a mask, you can now be charged with an additional crime because it's cold as shit outside and you're wearing a mask because it's cold. And the police start to march forward towards you, and now you're fleeing a crime. So you take that and you add it to the charge now of engaging in a riot, and you're looking at 3 years right there. Just because you were present. You don't even have to have touched anybody. And now you're looking at 3 years and $26,000 in fines? 3 or 4 years and $26,000 in fines. Just for those. But let's move on. Because they didn't stop there. We got House Bill 1293, which gives law enforcement the option of issuing a non-criminal citation and $250 fine for some trespassing offenses. They don't even have to charge you with shit. They don't have to, it's just a citation, okay? It's like a speeding ticket. They don't have to prove it right there at that moment. They just hand you a fine. Well, you owe this, show up to court. If you don't show up to court, you're guilty. And if you show up to court, you're guilty anyway, because anybody that's ever been to traffic court or a court over a citation, you know that the moment you walk in there, the law is not on your side. You have to prove your innocence. They do not have to prove your guilt. You have to go in there and prove that you're innocent. That is how citation court works. That's how that works. Sure, they want to talk a good game and say, well, you're guilty or you're innocent until you're proven guilty. That is the most bucket of horse shit I think I've ever heard in my life. If you've ever been to traffic court and pled not guilty for something that you literally did not do, and you go in there and the officer says, you ran a stop sign, and you look at the officer and say, no, I didn't run a stop sign. I have a witness that was in the car that can say that I didn't run a stop sign. So now you've got a witness. That's two people saying you didn't run a stop sign. And then this other cop, he's reading what he wrote off of the ticket, and that's his only recollection of the entire interaction between you and him. He doesn't even remember what happened. He just knows what was written on the ticket. So he's reading, well, on this day, this person happened, and then the judge said, "Do you swear by this?" Yes. This is what happened. They don't even remember the color of your car. They don't remember you. They don't remember the dog. They don't remember your kids. They don't remember anything. But by God, they know for a fact. In that officer's testimony, that ticket is worth more. Is more evidentiary than you saying I didn't do it. The officer doesn't have to prove a damn thing. So now on top of the 4 years in jail that you're going to get and the $26,000, you've also got, and it's so if the DA can't make any of those stick, well, you're still stuck with this citation, $250 citation that you have to pay. Never get charged with anything. They just hand you a ticket and say, come to court. Now, there's this other bill that is in the works, and I'm not sure if it passed. It may have. It's House Bill 1193. And as of February 16th, the Senate hadn't considered it yet. But based on the history of these protest laws that they're passing, based on that alone, this thing's going to get passed. Because listen to this. House Bill 1193 would make it a Class C felony to cause economic harm of more than $1,000 while committing a misdemeanor offense. Are you kidding me? You will be charged with a felony, a Class C felony, if you cause economic harm of more than $1,000 while committing a misdemeanor offense. Now, do you notice how all of these fit together? Do you notice how all these bills really just work off of each other? Because look at this, while committing a misdemeanor. So now you've got these other two bills. House Bill 1304 makes it a Class A misdemeanor to wear a mask while you're committing a crime or fleeing from a crime. Okay, so there's a misdemeanor. Let's say that you're in the middle of a protest and you stop traffic, okay, in this protest. And stopping traffic is called civil disobedience, and it's supposed to be, protected speech in this country. So you stop traffic or whatever on a road or on a sidewalk, and the protest gets so large that traffic stops. And the business starts to lose money, okay? And the state starts to lose taxes. The city starts to lose taxes. Let's say that happens. I mean, it's a hypothetical situation, but it could happen. Let's say that happens, and it's cold as shit outside. It's negative 40 degrees below, or negative 40 degrees, or even 32 degrees outside. Still cold as hell. And you happen to be wearing some kind of an eye mask or even a bandana because it's cold, or goggles, and they can't see who you are because they can't see your eyes. It's a form of a mask. That's what they'll say. So if you do that, now they can then charge you with another crime of a Class C felony because the state and the city and the business, they lost more than $1,000 in revenue. And is this something that you are going to be able to disprove without one of the best attorneys in the state? That's very doubtful. How in the hell do you disprove that you or the protest or whatever that you were part of caused economic hardship of $1,000 more? Because let's face it, we have to face reality here. The reality is you are not innocent until proven guilty in the United States of America. That is a farce. That is bullshit. You are guilty until you can prove yourself innocent. And that's the way it works. In 75, probably even 80, 90% of the cases in this country. I see it over and over and over and over again. Unless it's just some completely ridiculously absurd charge. And there you have a video proof or evidence. You walk into the courtroom with some evidence that proves that you're innocent. You will get off of it in a lot of cases. But if you don't, how do you disprove it? Because you're going to get charged with it. Especially if you are a Native American living in a state where Native Americans have a big, prominent presence. States like Oklahoma, Arizona, New Mexico, North Dakota, South Dakota, states like that, where the native tribes are actually a fairly large portion of the population and a huge economic driver for the state. If you're in one of those states, you are already looked down upon by the justice system, by the government, by the cities, by the people. You've already lost. And why is that? In this day and age, why is that? With all of this anti-racial stuff that we see, Native Americans are talked about the least in the news. And Native Americans actually have it worse than black people do. I don't think people realize that. But the statistics show that you're even more likely to be killed by a police officer if you're a Native American than if you're black. And let me tell you something, that's a big statement. Because you're way more likely to be killed by a police officer if you're black versus if you're white or any other race for that matter. But then you take it a step further and Native Americans are even more likely than blacks to be killed by police. They're more like the life expectancy rate of Native Americans on these reservations is 30, 40 years old? Seriously, not kidding you. These people are still being oppressed in this nation. And this right here is how the government of North Dakota responds to protests over water. We're talking about water. The basic fundamental thing that we need for survival, because our plants won't survive if we don't have it. Our animals won't survive if we don't have it. We will not survive without the plants, and we will not survive without the animals. And because they went out there and protested for so long, and they followed the European way, forgive me for putting it in that way, but I'm just going to put it in those terms. They took the route of the Europeans, the way they assimilated themselves into this justice system. And look what it got them. It got them 3 and possibly 4 horrendous bills that are designed for nothing more than to stifle free speech. And it was aimed directly at every single one of those protesters. And it just so happens that those protesters were mostly Native Americans. So you tell me that that isn't racial oppression by a government. You tell me that the oppression and the extinction of Native Americans isn't currently going on. And if you can't see that, then nothing is going to prove that to you. Nothing. The news media doesn't even cover Native Americans. They'll show blips of what's going on in these protests, but for the most part, they don't say shit. This isn't blasted all over everywhere, except in other countries, because this right here proves how bad the United States really is when it comes to caring about its people, and more specifically, the indigenous people of this country. Now, I want to point out a big difference between the way the United States handles things and the way other nations handles things. In Germany, and I work with Germans on a daily basis, and I've talked with them, and they have to, in school, they have to go through years and years and years and years of education about what happened in German history and why it can never, ever happen again. They openly admit to what happened. They talk about the concentration camps. They bring pieces of history into the classes so that they can see, so that all these children can see exactly what the leaders of their nation were capable of doing if they weren't smart enough to look out for it. Germany does that. It's mandatory in their classes that they learn this stuff and that they live by that because they don't ever want it to happen again. Now I want you to open up your child's textbook, your child's history book. You read through there about the colonization of America, and you tell me if we're trying to if we're trying to admit to the wrongs that we've done, or if we're trying to hide the truth from every single one of those students in class. Now, granted, a lot more has changed since the 80s based in those history books, because it used to be a lot worse. But there's still things in there about how great the Pilgrims were. And we celebrate the Pilgrims on Thanksgiving. That's what you hear about. All the Pilgrims, they made this great feast for the Native Americans, and the Native Americans had never seen such bounty. That's what our history books say. But that isn't what happened. The Pilgrims that came here, they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. They showed up close to fall or into fall. They couldn't plant anything. They didn't have any food. They didn't know what the hell was going on. They didn't create that bounty because they didn't have shit. Matter of fact, there is evidence, written notes by the Pilgrims that talk about the fact that they actually dug up Native American graves to steal the baskets of corn and steal the baskets of food that was buried with those Native Americans. And you tell me if those Native Americans had enough food to bury, to send their ancestors that had passed away from European diseases, mind you, they had enough food to do that and still live. And you want to tell me the Pilgrims created some huge feast that Native Americans had never seen before? You smoking crack. Didn't happen. That's false. But that's what the damn textbook will tell you. There's even reports that the Pilgrims were cannibalizing themselves and the corpses of some of the native people that died because they were starving to death. 50% of them died. And the Native Americans gave them food, took care of them, showed them how to plant crops. They did it the way that peaceful, loving people do. Now, I'm not saying that Native Americans are perfect. They still warred with other tribes, and they took slaves from other tribes. Ooh, but then you look at what they actually did with the slaves. They took the slaves in and raised them as their own and brought them in as members of the tribe. That was the way that they were able to not have incestual children. by going to these other tribes. It was almost like a trade-off. And when they went to war, they didn't try to demolish every fucking person that was on the other side. They didn't do that. Not until the Europeans showed up, they didn't. They would have a disagreement. They would, go out and do their battle, and they'd come home. They didn't try to kill each other and demolish each other. So, but here we've got the U.S. government, the European government, still trying to do it. Still trying to do it. And where's the fucking news media? Where is the news media talking about this? Where are all the op-eds about this? I don't see them. They're out there, sure, but not on any level that you would see if it had been a black protest. If it had been any other protest, white protest even, would have gotten more coverage. Now, the globe is watching, and the United States of America is looking real bad at this point. Is looking real bad. Now, I tell you what happened, and there's a lot of correlations between what's going on now in America and what happened before World War II in Nazi Germany. There's a lot of similarities, and guess what happened? Germany got invaded. Germany got destroyed. And if we don't stop what we're doing, the globe is eventually going to say, "F them." They're going to say no more. These people are a danger to the globe. They are a danger to every race on the planet. They are a danger to everybody. They will call us a terrorist state, and they will invade us. Because look at what we're doing to our people. When Egypt or Libya or any of those other nations in the Arab Spring or any other nation during any protest, when those nations come out and shoot them with tear gas and shoot them with rubber bullets and arrest them and beat the shit out of the protesters, what does the United States leaders do? What do? They come out and say, I'm going to have to ask you guys to allow them to protest. Protesting is good for a free or for a free country, and you need to let the people protest. What? Who the hell are you talking to? Obama? Because Obama did that I don't know how many times yet. In this nation, it happened almost daily. Every month at least, you would see these abuses against protesters getting arrested because they're out there and now it's a riot. Oh, they got colored skin. They got colored skin and that's a riot. That's not a protest. You can't protest if you got colored skin. I mean, that's what it feels like. It's probably not to that level, but it's a sad story. So these bills are designed to stifle free speech, and it was specifically directed at Native Americans because of the Native American protests. Now, you tell me that isn't messed up. And even the bill, and I hadn't even mentioned the bill that would allow people to run protesters over. You remember that? Oh, if there's a protester on the highway, you won't be charged with a crime for running them over and killing them. I don't think that one passed, and I seriously doubt that it ever would. I would hope not. I would hope we're not to that level yet. But I mean, come on, what kind of a society a quote unquote free society? What kind of society does that? That is ridiculous. Okay, now guys, my rant is over. This is something I'm very passionate about, and that's why I've spoken at length here. I honestly, I can't bitch about this enough. This really upsets me. This is something that, my whole family is Native. I didn't grow up in the culture. I didn't grow up, going to, I've been to powwows and stuff and been to religious ceremonies as a child. But my mother went to a native boarding school back in the 50s and 60s. I say native boarding school, but they called them Indian boarding schools. And they beat the shit out of them. My mom still, she's 60 years old. My mom still has nightmares about what they did to her as a child at this Indian boarding school. And she believes they even killed some of the native children there. Now, these boarding schools were government funded, and they were created to beat the native out of you. That's what they were for, to beat the native out of you, to force you to assimilate into the European community. And I am a direct product of that because it worked. My mom went in at a very young age. And when she came out, she had a huge chip on her shoulder. She came out as a fighter. My whole entire family did. I've got 19 aunts and uncles, many, many family members. And, it just expands from there. But that was only 60 years ago, people. That was only 60 years ago that this was happening. And this is happening today. Please open your eyes. Why are we letting this happen? And then if you saw my other video, we've got these, what we call apples, the leaders of these tribal governments. They're red on the outside and white on the inside. They're every bit as bad, if not worse, than the damn European governments, these tribal governments. They get in there and they want to line their own pockets. They do whatever they can to line their own pockets, and then they shit all over the the tribal members, and they go on. It's no different. That phone call just proved it to me that, something I've been bitching about my own tribe, my own tribal leaders for so long now. And then when I made that phone call, I realized that this probably is the case in almost every other native tribe. And it's this forced assimilation, this forced materialization of everybody. Oh, you got to have this, you got to have that, you got to have this, you got to have that, got to get that car. If you don't, you're a piece of shit. If you don't have that big house, you're worthless. If you don't have those nice clothes, you're worthless. That's the assimilation that happened. That was the main difference between Europeans and Native Americans when they first got here. Native Americans were healthy. They were happy. They thrived in this country. Estimates show that up to 100 million Native Americans were here. 95% of them were killed within 300 years. 95% of all natives were killed during the colonization. That's like, depending on the numbers, that's 80 to 95 million Native Americans slaughtered. Nobody talks about that. You won't see that in the history book because it ain't there. Not in the one that your child is looking at anyway. All right, guys, that's it for now. I literally could sit here for another 3 hours and bitch about this, but I'll save you the I'll save you the irritation, I guess. Anyway, I'll probably do another video later about it as a wrap up, or if there's any follow up material for the protests. I'm really sad though that I didn't go. I should have went anyway. We had it planned out, and that phone call just pissed me off so bad that we didn't go. It felt pointless then, because if we don't have the backing of all of the natives in the area, then what the hell's the point? So, but I was wrong in that, and I should have gone anyway, because there is still a point, and I should have went. But nonetheless, I will keep you guys updated. Please hit the subscribe button if you like what I have to say. I don't post as much anymore because I work a lot, but I look out for major posts, major news events that happen, and I speak about that. So hit the subscribe button and leave me a comment in the comment section if you agree, disagree, or or have no opinion in the matter. Leave a comment anyway. This is Tim with Op-Ed Daily. Peace out.